Okay, I see we have Judy Ennis. Hopefully she can hear me.
I can, Heather.
Thank you, Judy. Thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
Okay, all yours, John.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll call our meeting to order. The Historic Preservation Commission, and we'll have roll call. We'll just say our names, all right? I'm John Sampen here.
Les Barber, present.
Will Raudebush here.
Chris Mowen here.
Next item on our meeting agenda will be the approval of minutes from the October 23rd meeting. Are there any revisions, changes? You probably don't have it, do you, Chris? The minutes?
I can't remember. I don't know if I.
Okay. Will, you okay with?
I'm okay. I would make a motion that we approve the October 23rd meeting minutes.
We have a second? I'll second it. Can I second it? Okay.
Yes.
So they're approved. Thank you. We would like to welcome any members that might be online from the Planning Commission. We appreciate their support and help, and we'll be talking with them very soon about our ordinance. I don't know, Judy, are you a member of the Planning Commission?
Yes. Yeah. Excuse me. Yes, I am. And I'm also on the zoning board. So yes, I
Great.
cover
Well,
both.
Thank you for joining us today.
Welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
Sure. I want to introduce our newest member of the commission, Chris Mowen. She's replacing Gail Nader. And Chris, maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and a little biography, short biography.
Sure. I am a BG resident on West Worcester in the Boomtown district, and I'm a historic preservation architect with Thomas Porter Architects downtown, so right next to Mud Hen.
Great. Are you a native of Ohio?
I'm not. I grew up in Colorado. I've been here 3.5 years.
Okay. Well, we're delighted to have you on the
Yeah.
commission. Thank you. And Chris shared with us some articles or a couple of things that talked about our preservation efforts from professionals who thought we were developing plans that were very appropriate and should work well for our community. So thanks for that. We have a resignation. Our fifth member was John Wade, and he unfortunately could no longer work with us on the commission. So he's resigned, and we'd like to thank him for his several months of service. We really appreciated his input. He was representing the downtown business district. Do we have any movement, Heather, on a new replacement for him?
Last I talked to the mayor, he's given some very critical thought to this position. He feels it's really an important representative that is needed as a property owner for the downtown. And I have no updates since he's basically that he wasn't quite sure yet.
Okay.
So
I know, Chris, you nominated a couple people. Do they want nominations from us, or is that something the mayor wants to take
Um,
well,
out?
it's his decision, but he always takes recommendations.
Okay.
Ask a question, Heather. I wrote to the mayor about this. Both the ordinance that created us and the ordinance that we're proposing, they don't say that the representative has to be a property owner downtown.
Correct.
Because they can be either a property owner or a downtown business person.
Correct.
But he knows that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And if you don't mind, talk really close to your microphone. It won't pick up very well for the
Okay.
public. Just to,
Okay, just keep reminding us. if we
I'll
forget.
try. I feel like
That's
definitely
fine.
don't want to forget that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we'll hopefully have that filled in the near future. We've got a pretty full agenda today, and we'll try to get through everything. I don't know, Chris, if we can get to your suggestions, and I don't, Will, you have some guideline suggestions also. We'll see if we can talk about those a little bit. Today you collected a few things from around the state. We appreciate that. So Heather, can you give us a little information about your Historic Preservation Advisory Committee that you've been re-elected or nominated yourself? How did that happen?
They just emailed me and asked
That's
for me to
great.
be on it and wanted a
Excellent.
Northwest Ohio representative. So we did have one meeting so far. They talked a lot about the previous plan and that they have to have a plan per the federal requirements every 5 years. So this is their next update they're working on. They wanted us to review their previous recommendations and basically take some initial input as to how those may be changed or some ideas. So we talked about that a lot. And since then, they had sent out a survey. So I think I forwarded that to you all. So they really want that filled out. I think the deadline already passed though. So my guess is we'll get together after they collect those survey results and then formulate some data. So I haven't heard about our next meeting yet, but otherwise it was exciting to talk to various folks across the state of various positions. So I'll
Right.
keep you informed.
Excellent. It's great to have you on that committee, and
Yeah.
you're gonna,
terrific
Yeah,
to
especially
have
'cause we're not a
Bowling
certified
Green-
local
have
government,
Bowling Green
so-
represented.
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's terrific. So the CLG, I want to jump into that, our continuing efforts. We had I think, a very successful presentation for the city council. This was on November 2nd, and Les Barber and I were representing the committee. We presented had a PowerPoint presentation with a few pictures and talked about our efforts over the last year. And I sensed a strong interest from the council and also a nice endorsement from the mayor on that evening from our presentation. So I think it was,
And by the president of council,
and the president of
Also,
council as
actually.
well. That's true. Yeah. So I
although
think,
it wasn't at that meeting, it was the former meeting. So you're right. I take it back. It was in another context where he,
right. And we sent a message, a follow-up message to the council and the planning commission, just suggesting if they had any questions to share them with us. There were none, but John Zaffardino did respond to me saying, I have no questions about the legislation, just a note of thanks for your work on this committee. I'm not aware of any concerns that have been raised by the proposed legislation, and I expect this to be approved unanimously. So that's a nice little endorsement from him. Okay. Concerns from the BG Planning Commission. Heather, we did have a one comment, I think, that came to you.
Yes, this was introduced at the Planning Commission meeting in December, so that was December 2nd. So I did make sure they were aware that we would want to hear any feedback and comments and concerns that I could relay to the HPC. That way you could adapt your presentation at their public hearing on January 6th. So I thought that would be helpful. And so after that meeting, we did immediately get, I thought, some, I guess, valuable questions from Will Earhart, one of our Planning Commission members. So I forwarded that to you. I thought that would be helpful. In addition to that, I wanted to point out that Jeff Betts is now on Zoom and he is the chairperson of the Planning Commission. So just a
Great.
heads up on that. Also, Will had asked that I hand out a paper copy just so you had it of the ordinance. And I did add to it just the Planning Commission public hearing date, and then that City Council public hearing was scheduled for February 1st. I thought that would be helpful. So here's
Good.
those extra copies if
Good.
you'd like to see those.
So some of the concerns were, I'll just read this. I took it from your message to me, Heather. After the meeting, this was this Chris that was telling you this? I don't know who that person was again that you met with, but the concern was how this might impact people who do not want the overlay zoning. He seemed most concerned about the financial implications for people that already live in a costly older home that may be financially strapped during the pandemic and also have no incentives like commercial people do. So those were the concerns. That one concern, I don't think there was any other ones that surfaced.
Are you reading the one from Will Earhart?
That's always Will. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Will.
No,
Yeah, I wanna make
he's-
sure I'm-
Sorry, he's reading from your cover memo in which
Gotcha,
you mentioned
okay.
another member who.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
Okay.
And also I have handouts that Les had sent us and we made copies of that. You want to pass those down? That was something Les can explain when we're ready. But that's all I received so far since the planning commission meeting was that one email.
Thank you.
And I figure I could respond to him after you had discussed the questions, if you had any additional comments. I think I can handle a good majority of it.
Do we have another one of these? We're missing.
Oh, you can give that. I have.
I'm sorry, I thought I.
That's okay. That's fine.
You sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
because I've got
This is your
this.
stuff.
Yeah, I've got
Okay.
it.
Okay.
But I thought it'd be helpful to adapt again that
Yeah.
presentation, the public hearing.
My preliminary impression is that we'll be able to respond to this fairly easily. You know, I don't know if John and I are the ones who will wind up doing it again, but doesn't really matter because I think our ordinance really addresses this issue by, among other things, saying that even if you became a member of a historic district without wanting to be, you would not be required to do anything to your home if you were content with leaving it and preserving it as is. I think that's the primary thing that
Mhm.
I would say in answer to this concern.
Good. Unless you had some other suggestions, we can get to the FAQs, is that what you call it? Yes, a little bit later, but you had some suggestions
Yeah,
for response,
I thought that the one thing that we definitely should do, because we are meeting with the planning commission after all, and Heather has suggested this to us in the past, that we ought to make a point of reminding everyone, including ourselves, that the city has, in the last decade, I think it has on at least 4 different occasions, at least 3, formally gone on record as saying that the city should have a historic preservation commission and by implication should be dealing significantly with historic preservation as one of the essential planning tools to make the city a better place for the future. So I think we definitely want to make sure we have that language ready to talk to the commission about.
Good.
So that's one thing.
Well, and there's so many other cities that already have these, and
yeah.
Right.
we're the only universities town that doesn't.
What are there now, 78?
Something like that.
Mhm.
78
Yes.
cities in the state. So,
Including all of the other university
right.
cities in Ohio.
But I think just by doing it, it helps us benefit from the state historic preservation connections with possible grants and things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
One thing I noticed when I was taking that, doing that advisory board, what's the word I want? Their request for input. One of the suggestions that somebody has apparently posed as a possibility is that in the future, financial help for individual homeowners as well as for commercial homeowners. And, I think that would be a very desirable thing in the long run if it can be managed at the state level and
Yeah.
encourage people, cities like us, encouraged to do the same.
Good.
Yes, that was a long discussed topic at that
Was it?
first meeting because the feeling was, the commercial, the mixed use, multifamily, they have incentives, whereas a residential property owner really has no incentives. I mean, tangible, should I say? I mean, there's a sense of pride, et cetera, but there was a lot of concern that there's no real incentive for those type of property owners. So I think majority of us agreed that was really critical, that maybe that tax credit program could be expanded for residential.
Excellent. That would be great.
Do they have a timeline on when these sorts of changes might occur?
Well, the timeline for the plan is about a year.
Okay.
So, but beyond that, I'm not sure. I mean, there's always discussion of having to lobby for that type of change. So probably a long road for that, but at least the plan has about a year timeline.
And there was a sense of support for that. So that's
Yes.
another arguing point for us down the road. I mean, we're months away from getting this approved anyway. And no, can we do it faster?
Well, I
than
mean, really,
February.
February 1st is the potential.
approved here,
could
but
be
I
a
mean,
vote.
it has to go to the state then for don't they have to agree to
Right.
the-
We would have to submit our checklist
Yeah.
to become a CLG.
Right.
Mhm.
Any other?
Yeah, there's
Suggestions?
the second thing that I wanted to ask your opinion about. I took out, based on the concerns that we know of from members of the Planning Commission, I selected 3 of the FAQs that we'll talk about in a broader way later on, perhaps. And that's this one-page handout with the blue, was what, it should be in what Heather just passed around.
It says selected as FAQ.
Yeah, so I was wondering if it might be wise to take copies of this and hand it out to members of the Planning Commission when we do because these address 3 of the most basic questions. The first one is, what does the ordinance require the people to do? And the answer is nothing. The second one talks about the old post office building and Needles Hall and makes it clear that this ordinance does not make them official historic districts with protection. They're historic districts in the National Register of Historic Places, but they would not be protected properties in Bowling Green automatically if this ordinance passed.
Unless we,
It would have to be a subsequent application
Yeah,
and
right.
recommendation from us and approval by council.
Mhm.
And then the third one was concerning areas of the question was, have areas of BG already been identified? And the answer is no. I mean, we have certainly talked about some obvious possibilities, Boomtown and downtown being 2 of them, but no decisions have been made, and this ordinance does not include any. And then number 4 is, and this is a critical one, even after the ordinance passes, if it does, and an official listed individual property or historic district is approved, even then, nothing is required of a property owner to do to his or her property unless they want to make substantial changes. Then they would have to seek approval, but if they simply want to preserve what they have, they don't have to do anything. So those are the reasons why I thought maybe these 4.
Absolutely. It's a good idea.
Number 3 might be a spot to include something about the overlay zoning and like the relationship between it and historic districts.
I'm
Are-
sort
are
of
they one and the
assuming that
same, or
the
no?
planning commission members will understand the historic overlay business pretty fully, so that's why I didn't do it, but we could, yeah,
Maybe just the word overlay, something
Yeah,
so they realize it is
Mhm.
considered.
yeah. The overlay district is basically the mechanism by which the enforcement of the ordinance could be accomplished.
Good.
Yeah, that's a good point, Will. Okay.
That would take care of some of the concerns, if it's,
Oh, since we have two plan commission members, perhaps it's a good time to ask if they would like any comments addressed or
absolutely.
how to cater the presentation.
Sure.
We would welcome that.
Everything's clear so far.
Yes, it is, and I will defer to the chair to Mr. Betts if he has any, but yes, thank you. You're making things very clear.
Among other things, that means you can hear us, which is good.
Yeah, that's right. So
Yeah,
we
I'm
will-
sorry. I started to type something. I didn't realize we were going to be able to do audio. Yeah, the first question, gentlemen, that comes to my mind is, oh, I'm sorry. And gentleman and lady, is what is the smallest size that one of these overlay districts can be?
I would think it could be
Single
a building.
property.
One property, a house or a building.
Okay. So
Is
in
that-
theory, then it would be possible if you were in a block where there was somebody who fit the example you kind of bust out earlier about they don't have the money to, do even this very reasonable sounding historic preservation that you've kind of laid out. Maybe they want to make other modifications to the house, whatever the case, just somebody who, for whatever reason, is not interested in participating in a larger area where it would seem logical. So what I'm trying to find out is, can they just opt out? So that's why I'm asking the size question. If it can be one property at a time, it seems like that takes care of that issue. Is that possible?
Yes, it's possible, and I think it does take care of the issue in the sense that it would almost certainly be an application from the owner themselves to become a protected property.
I see.
As far as the historic districts go, I would have to look it up in the ordinance to be sure, but I think it says that there have to be two or more properties, maybe it's 3 or more properties for a historic district to be considered.
Okay, and that's actually what I was trying to get at more.
Yeah,
So-
it's in here somewhere. I need to look it up. Sorry, Jeff, I don't have it on the,
No, and that's fine. I'm not even looking for an immediate answer here today. I'm bringing it up because that's certainly one of the things I would hope we could discuss when you folks visit us at our public hearing. So,
Yep.
Yeah, so that's nice because even at the 3 figure, that seems like there's a lot more flexibility for someone who is in a position where they don't wish to participate, where they can basically opt out, not have that extra financial obligation.
to be fair, I think maybe we should point out, if the historic district were larger, let's say it were 10 or more houses, 10 or more properties, it's possible that there could be 1 or more of those properties that didn't really want to participate. They would not necessarily have the choice to opt out. If they were defined as part of the district, they would be part of the district. Their protection is that they're not really required to do any changes to their property unless they wish to.
Can I
Right,
get
but-
clarification? Sorry, Jeff.
No, go ahead.
When you say historic district, are you referring to the districts that are through NPS?
No, these would be new.
No,
These are our
new.
districts.
These are they're
Okay.
defined,
Yep.
they're defined in the definition as
Okay.
our
Ours.
district.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I can see what we're trying to do. Everything we try to do is for people to want to participate so that they could benefit from being in the historic districts, not trying to be out or
Yeah.
exclude. I could see,
Sure, and I don't disagree with that in theory. I think everybody in that room probably agrees that this has just been one hell of a year and it's going to take some people a long time to recover from it for various reasons. So I think that this is a potential, financial aspect, I think, is an additional potential burden. I think we just want to be really sensitive about. And I hear what you're saying about not wanting to you don't have to do it if you don't want to, make changes. But what if somebody has their house and they want to make changes in okay, let's say they have the money, they're not strapped, but they want to make changes in a totally different direction because when they bought the house, that was their idea. They don't want to go towards preserving the historic characteristics of it. Is that, what happens to them?
Who wants to tackle that?
Okay, so a little hard to imagine the situation. So somebody who bought the house not knowing that it was part of a historic district?
No, somebody who's already in the zoning, current
Yeah.
zoning, that they bought the house and now all of a sudden there's a historic overlay district superimposed on them that they don't want to participate in.
Well, if they're part of,
That's what I'm trying to find out.
yeah, okay. So, all right. So we'll need to try to have as good an answer for that as we can by the time we meet with you.
Well, and there's a whole other layer to that too. Is it a contributing property and a non-contributing property? That's
Right.
a whole other issue too.
That's right.
I have
What
a
else?
question, and it refers to the zoning board of appeals. It says that they may, the decisions made by you may be appealed to the zoning board of appeals. And maybe this is a Heather question, but the zoning board cannot overrule deed restrictions on a property. Is it going to be the same for the historical preservation district? Are we not going to, if we say, no, you don't have to do that, or we're not going, and the commission says, yes, you have to do it. Which body's going to have the control?
Well, the appeal process was chosen to go to the zoning board. So let's say the Historic Preservation Commission denies a certificate of appropriateness, and let's say they've tried to work with that owner, brought them back to a couple meetings. The owner just doesn't want to do what the HPC wants them to do. And I hate to say, I think the intent of the ordinance was to not get to that point, though. It really was to work with people and be more of an advisory role. I'm not speaking for the HPC, just sitting here all these
think
months.
that's true. Yeah.
That's what I picture. I picture appeals being very minimal. And
It says here that the 2/3 vote of the Board of Appeals shall be required to overturn a decision of the commission.
right.
So I sincerely would hope it wouldn't get to that position either, but I can see some people coming to the zoning board. So I just wanted to make sure it wasn't the same atmosphere as we have with deed restrictions, where we say, okay, we can't overrule deed restrictions, but obviously we can overrule the Historical Preservation Commission according to this ordinance, correct?
You can by 2/3 of a vote.
Okay,
And then part of give you a little bit of background, we read a lot of other historic preservation ordinances that, another option was to choose city council for the appeal process. And there was some concerns to be political going that route. And we really wanted to have a board that, you regularly see appeals, and it made sense. And then beyond that, it made sense that they still have a path to the Wood County Court of Common Pleas too. So if they didn't agree with the ZBA decision, they still have another path. So it
Okay.
seemed more reasonable to pick the ZBA, and again, we hope they were very minimal, that it would turn into that process, because certainly I don't think the HPC wants to be I don't know the right word. We want to work with people.
Yeah, we can encourage. I know the planning commission, when I was on it originally, took 2/3 to overrule us, and that was changed to a majority. Because I was just doing a calculation. So the zoning board of appeals right now, it would actually, for 2/3, it would take 5 votes. That's 2/3. So at least to start that way, and then it may end up being modified like the planning commission voting was to 50%.
We hope not, but
No, but I mean,
Could be,
that's,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Good
So-
questions.
Yeah, I have another question I want to toss out here. And before I say this, I just, I want to say, all of you, I mean, I certainly concur with the comments that were read earlier from John Zanfordino. I mean, I think what you're doing is really tremendous. I personally, you're probably thinking that my questions are obstructionist, and I don't mean to be that. It's just that I'm trying to think about somebody who already owns the property where they own it, and if it all of a sudden it becomes an overlay district, that's like changing the zoning code after the fact, and then, depending on their financial situation. I just want to avoid that if possible. And so that's, as you can tell from my questions, that's one of the things I'm trying to get at, is to find out how much flexibility there is so that somebody who does want to abstain can. Now, the question I was going to ask is, so I assume that when this all gets going, if everything's approved, you folks will be choosing areas that makes a lot of sense. Like you've got, say, let's just use, Worcester Street as an example, where you have some of the grandest old homes around, and probably most of the people who live in those houses really just treasure the idea of taking care of that house and preserving it and being true to the historic character of it. So, I mean, assume that, well, can you describe to me what kind of process you're going to use when you're targeting an area to become a historic overlay zoning code?
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet.
well,
Okay.
we have not actually written yet a detailed process, although that's one of the things on our agenda.
Sure.
But first of all, I would like to point out that we probably will never be in the position of choosing a district per se. I mean, we may have some districts in mind, but there's going to have to be some kind of local incentive, some local input before we would have a proposal for any particular historic district. So that's one thing.
Yeah,
Second thing is the vote. I mean, there
That's
has to
right.
be a vote of all of the owners of the proposed district as to whether or not to move forward with a recommendation to city council. So those are two things that occur to me offhand.
So I could see a homeowner or business owner maybe planting the seed of the district and being the first, and then others will want to join in to enlarge the district.
When you say a vote, gentlemen, and ladies, sorry, Chris, are you saying that 51% of those in the suggested district have to say yes?
Correct.
Yes.
Is that set by the National Historical Registry, that it has to be 51%?
Don't
Or
think
is
there's
that just something
any
that you
rule, there's
said?
no rule like this.
Do you think it might be, you might think about upping that percentage to maybe like 60%, which might help ease some of the concerns?
We did consider that, and there are other cities that have used 60%. We decided that 50% is the better number.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
So then what I'm getting based on what you were saying before is that this is more, you see this flowing up more from the community, kind of on a grassroots level, and then the commission becomes really the place where it officially becomes a reality, if in fact the people who are in the targeted the district where they've come together and said, yes, we want to do this, more like the approval body than don't see yourselves seeking out areas for this to happen then.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I mean, we might be interested in suggesting an area, suggesting to people in an area that they so organize, but we would not do the organizing. Our responsibility would be to include things like making sure that all of the documentation of the historic nature of the individual properties was done correctly before the recommendation was considered to recommend to council.
We might identify a property that we would like to nominate, property perhaps on the east side of town that is historic, and we would like to see it in our district in some way, but there's no requirement, and that the property owner would not necessarily have to agree to be joining the historic district.
Okay, okay, thank you.
I think just to look the other way, you know, I'm in a historic home. I know Chris is also, and we bought those homes because they are in a historic area, and we want to see that is preserved. And you know, we are going to have occasional people who, for whatever reason, maybe they inherited a home or they just haven't moved out. They don't want to do anything more with it, but we want to see those districts preserved. And there are, I think most of us that are living in older homes have done so for a very specific reason. Wouldn't you say, Chris?
Oh, well, I would hope so, that, you know, people who value that are, you know, looking to buy these homes. I know there's always incentive when it's a good deal, you know, to buy an older home, or, you know, some of the homes we have that have been turned into duplex or triplex, those
Yeah.
sorts of things that are, I would consider historic, but
But we're proud of these neighborhoods.
Right,
And I don't want to minimize your question, Jeff, about that one property owner who either can't afford to keep a home up or doesn't want to. But there are a lot of owners that do. And so this is one way that we can help. I think we're helping the whole community. I think that's our goal, is to bring something that is special and unique. I mean, it's not so unique in Ohio, but something that perhaps we could and should have here.
Sure. Yeah, I'm honestly, I absolutely concur with what the two of you just expressed in terms of your own love for your homes and why you purchased them. And I'm sure the vast majority of people who own that kind of home feel that way. I just, you know, they're not going to be an issue. It's the other people I'm asking the questions related to. So
Sure.
That's part of, you know, what we do on, you know, on our commission. So
Yeah, we appreciate that, and we'll make an effort to have a reasonably coherent component of what we say to you when we meet on this issue.
Any
that would be great.
thoughts? The commission? Oh, okay, let's move on to just firming up these upcoming meetings. And the next one will be the planning commission, right? On January 6th at 7 o'clock. Is that in this room?
Correct,
Is that
yes.
correct? Okay. So I think we need to know which one of us or all of us will be attending that. And who might be our main respondent.
I think you did a good presentation to council. Get it down. Plan to attend.
I'm going to rely on Les there for a lot of this.
Well, I
if you're
think
willing to
we could do basically the same kind of presentation adjusted for the
Planning Commission.
different body and also based on input that we've already received. But I think that if Chris, if you and Will can be there, that
Yeah.
would be,
That'd be
it would
great.
be excellent.
I'll
If we
respond
could all
to
be
any
there.
Concerns or
Okay.
Yeah.
What night is that?
Wednesday,
Okay.
The Wednesday.
January at 7 o'clock, you say?
yes. And we will have it on Zoom again and
Okay.
people can watch live, just so you're aware. I mean, obviously, we still have a lot of concerns with the pandemic, so we want to make sure there's various avenues to participate in the public hearing.
Right.
When you sent something out about there's a city council public hearing and also.
Yes, they had
February
scheduled their
1st.
public hearing on February 1st, yes. And that would also be at 7. Of course, it would be, well, no, I'm sorry, it's
It's
at 6:30. I'm thinking of the council meetings at 7.
And
But-
would that be the whole meeting? That city
Likely,
council
yes.
meeting, that would be just for the,
It would just be a public hearing to review this ordinance.
okay,
And then if things went smoothly, the council would presumably vote on the ordinance that evening.
okay. We would normally have a meeting in January at the last Friday. Is that correct?
Fourth Friday, I'm not sure how many. I didn't look ahead.
I never count those. I just looked at the last Friday. The last Friday's the 29th, but maybe there's.
Be the 22nd,
22nd would be the third.
22nd to next.
4th, that'd be the 4th.
That's the fourth?
Yes.
Oh, there are 5.
Yep.
Wow.
Okay, so can we plan on a meeting with this commission to make more plans for that public hearing? Is that okay? Everybody can meet on
Yeah.
that date?
So
And that,
22nd?
I
20
think we should meet in January. I don't care which day.
okay. 22nd's fine with me. Are
Yeah,
You okay?
Mhm.
At 3 o'clock?
3, sounds good.
Heather, that's okay for you?
It should be. Yeah, it should already be pre-programmed into this room too.
Great. And then I think for the public hearing, we should, if we can, all 4 of us try to be there for that. For moral support. Good. Okay, let's move on to the, I was going to move to your FAQs, but we've kind of covered that, right, Les? I think you talked through those
We
already.
covered the, well, I think the FAQs will come a little
A
later.
little bit later.
The
okay.
larger part of it.
Okay, all right, so our ordinance, our draft ordinance status. We have a few suggested revisions that I think we'll have time to discuss all these. Les, you want to start with yours for that 15806?
Okay, this is, in a way, this is a return to a planning commission concern. We had a written set of comments from Will Earhart. And one of them, you got the wrong thing here.
You want me to read it?
I'm supposed to have, here it is, yeah.
Okay.
One of them says that the language in 158.06F is squishy and may be the focus of opposition if such opposition arises. 2 options from his perspective would be either to drop the consent language, since we were otherwise granting flexibility to ignore it, or 2, include a requirement that the recommendation to council includes a notation of the landlord's non-consent. And that got me to go back and look at that F, and I do think that we might consider an amendment to it at this point, and which would basically drop some of the earliest language in current F and also include a phrase that says, including notice of the owner's non-consent, as suggested by Mr. Earhart. So I guess I'm asking the commission here whether you think this is something we ought to do at this point.
You're asking if we should amend?
Should amend, yeah.
Okay.
So 15806F. Bottom of page 9, I think.
Okay, let's read that. I'm going to read it out loud, and then let's read your suggested revision. Is that okay,
Okay.
Les?
Okay,
Okay, this is how it reads at the moment. If the owners of an individual property, whether within a historic district or not, refuses or declines to give their written consent to a proposed listing, and the commission feels it is of considerable importance to the community that the property be listed, the commission may still forward its written recommendation to city council, which will act on the recommendation following its usual procedures to include opportunity for written input from all sides as well as a public hearing.
okay. So the revision that I proposed just basically drops the first line and simply begins, if the commission feels it is of considerable importance to the community as a whole that an individual property be listed, even if the owners decline to give their written consent, the commission may forward a written recommendation to city council, including notice of the owner's non-consent. Council will act on the recommendation following its usual procedures, et cetera, to the end. This actually, I think, improves the ordinance because as I looked at it again, this F sort of confused the issue a little bit by talking about both individual properties and those within a historic district. And just for those who are listening, I think the reason this is here is only that we imagine the theoretical possibility that there might be an individual property somewhere in Bowling Green that is so distinctively linked to the identity of the city that we think it should be protected, but the owners are not interested. And the only example I can think of is the windmill
Wow.
on Clough Street. I mean, that is become so identified with Bowling Green and the public imagination way beyond our city that maybe it deserves, maybe, I'm not saying yes, but maybe it deserves to be protected. If the owners were not willing to seek protection under this ordinance, we're just giving ourselves the right to make such a recommendation to council. That's it. And so by getting rid of the reference to historic districts, I think we've actually improved this considerably. It was a confusion.
Yeah, and that still gives the council the right to
Say
to
no. Yeah.
say no to
Yep.
us and end of story. So I think it protects that owner in that way.
Has this gone forward to the council in the current version?
Yeah,
Then we can modify that?
we would have to tell them that
That's
there's
what
the
I think
that we can
modification.
report
I
to
like what
them.
Les,
I think that would be
I'm not sure
something.
Heather would have to ask you.
Personally, as far as procedural, it's already went to plan commission also. So what I would do is during perhaps your presentation, that you recommend
Recommend to
changes.
them this
Mhm.
revision.
And then
Okay.
before, depending on what plan commission does, if they recommend approval of the document with changes as suggested by the HPC, then that would be forwarded to council with that full recommendation.
I would make a motion that we propose the revision that Les written for item 15806F to be amended.
Chris, do you have any input on this?
No, I do think that helps
Okay,
clarify that.
do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Chris seconds. Call for a vote? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment
That's what-
carries. Now, Chris has put forth several potential amendments. And maybe I'll just let you discuss those a little bit if you would.
Yeah, sure. These were comments I emailed back in November, and I do apologize. It took me a little longer to get them out than I anticipated, but I wanted to make sure I, had some time to sit down and really read. The first one was just an overall comment. I just, for any of our members of the community, I just want to make sure they understand the difference, basically, some of these questions that have come up. If you're in Boomtown, which is a national historic district, is that, like, just clarifying that that's different than our historic district. That was just mainly my first comment.
And I think if you look at the definition of listed property in the definition
Right.
sections, I mean, you probably have already. Hopefully that's enough to answer that question.
Right. In 158.05I,
This is about compatible.
yeah,
with
number
the-
2 this is what we'll review in the COAs. Is compatible in character and nature with the historical, archaeological, architectural, or cultural features. I just think, I'm wondering if there's a way to sort of qualify what that means, just so homeowners have an understanding of what they want to do would be compatible in character. If they're thinking about certain aspects, a new roof or new windows, they can have an understanding of what maybe we would be looking for, rather than feeling like it's just us kind of imposing our
Do you think-
opinions.
Do you think it needs just those samples, those suggestions of what we're talking about within that number 2?
Or would just change the word compatible to similar.
Trying to think about this from someone who doesn't know,
Could I just make a comment here? I
Yeah.
think that what we envisioned is that the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines,
Mhm,
not the standards, but the guidelines which we reference in the ordinance, but don't make a part of the ordinance,
right,
that those guidelines will answer that question
right,
for us, for the HPC who has to decide.
yeah. I'm just trying to think, from a homeowner's perspective, if I'm going through going, okay, what do I have to do to get my COA? I think that's where I would wonder. So I don't know, maybe we can reference something that just gives them somewhere to go so they understand what exactly would be compatible, or,
So again, are you suggesting we put a sample in?
I mean, I
within-
think that'd be helpful. I don't know kind of legally how these ordinances work, if that's something that's appropriate to put into an ordinance,
I know
but
we
I do
took
think
a-
that would be helpful.
We had a lot of samples that we took out earlier, just to kind of pare it down. What do you think, Les? You kind of,
Do you think it would be helpful if we reference the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines here?
Yeah, I do think, just giving them somewhere to go to say, okay,
I think-
if I can follow these, I should be fine.
Compatible, so maybe, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, maybe an added sentence, compatibility will be judged in accordance with the guidelines the
Yeah.
Secretary of the Interior guidelines.
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that would be really,
That would address your concern. I don't see why we can't do that. I mean, I can't remember where we reference, I think it's in 07. Yeah, it's in 07B2, where we say that the guidelines, as opposed to the standards, include a wealth of information and suggestions about how best to accomplish a particular preservation project. Well, that would certainly include appropriateness and compatibility.
right.
So I think we could reference it here as well.
Mhm.
Don't see why not.
Right.
And that's not really a change, right? That's just a,
Well, it would be an addition, it would be additional
we-
language.
okay, then
to
we
this.
would need to
Yeah.
mention that as well. Okay,
So I don't know, what do you think?
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Heather, do you have any thoughts about that?
No, I mean, I can just make whatever updates you want, and then I think for the sake of brevity, I would email this to Planning Commission as some recommended changes from the HPC,
Good.
just so they have it ahead of time. But then I would still think either during my staff report, I could mention it, or include it at the beginning of your presentation. Here's some changes that came up since we have last introduced that ordinance. And then with new membership and that expert opinion, that's where it came from.
Good.
Okay, so should I try to write a sentence then and give it to Heather?
Did that?
Basically would say what I just said.
Yeah, you said it great. Just like that. So Heather, do you, maybe you can tell us if you're going to mention this in advance, or if we should, or maybe we should do both.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
both.
do both.
Yeah.
Okay.
mhm.
Okay, fine. All right. Back to you, Chris.
Oh. In 07A, number 6. I have to go reread this really quick.
This is contemporary design
Yeah. I was
shall
trying to
not be
find that.
discouraged.
Right, contemporary design for alterations and additions shall not be discouraged. So I think for that, I just had more of a clarification of if there's an addition that's visible from the, are you calling it, or is it right of way, or I forget the
Streetscape.
streetscape. Is the intent that it can be modern, or is that but
Are we talking
complementary, or-
about A3 or A6 now?
6.
Oh, okay, so we jumped over
Oh, did I
A3.
miss one? I apologize.
A3 was, yeah, you did have a question about that too. You want to jump back to 3
Sure,
first? Defining non-historic.
right. Because from a, when I'm writing up for like a historic tax credit project, a building, if it's on the National Registry, will have a period of historic significance. And anything outside of that period is non-historic. And there's a lot more leeway on what you can and can't do. From, if I'm talking about tax credit type of project,
Right.
projects. And I was wondering if there was something like that we would have in place. Sometimes it's decades, sometimes it's
Yeah.
the date the building was built and that's it. So is that something we'll be looking at when?
Yeah,
when
yes,
we're-
absolutely. And
Okay.
we haven't written a set of guidelines for the commission to follow in doing that, but that's certainly one of the things we would have to do. And it might include multiple historic eras, mightn't it?
Right. Mhm.
So before listing, there would have to be a description of the property that we agreed to
Mhm.
that would define the historic elements of that property. There
Okay.
might be one historic era, there might be two, there might be three, but whatever is in our description would be the historic part. Anything else would be non-historic.
Okay. So, and that will be something that, so the non-historic features
Features.
will be something that we would know once that district is created.
Before, yeah, we would know before because we would have to have agreed, yeah, this is our description of that property.
Right.
Here's our description of this property, et cetera.
Okay. So
That makes
so
sense
they'll-
according to your
Right.
understanding of the
So,
process?
and the property owners would then know, okay, this is
Right.
the period for my house and anything outside of that is non-historic.
Right.
Okay.
So you're okay with the wording?
Yeah,
with
I just
that
was curious how
understanding?
that was going to
Okay.
be
Okay,
uh,
good.
determined.
So then
All right,
this
we can
is
go back.
158.076.
Mhm.
The contemporary design shall not be discouraged.
So it just states, sorry, contemporary design for alterations and additions to the rear of historic buildings and non-contributing properties shall not be discouraged when the design of such alterations and additions is compatible in size, scale, color, material, etc. I know it states in the additions to the rear of the buildings, but I was curious if we had, what would happen if it was to the side or in the front?
Actually, I thought that that was a really good comment. And when I went back and looked at this language, I wondered why we ever included the phrase contemporary design at all. And I suggest we just drop it.
Just drop that part or just leave
Just
out
drop the reference to contemporary design.
Just say, in addition, alterations and additions and leaving that out?
Just have, just say design in addition, comma, design for alterations and additions to the rear.
And then for the, because all we're wanting to do here, Chris, is make
that's
it
a-
clear in general that additions at the rear of buildings, that we're going to be more flexible, more lenient about that under any regard.
Okay,
And as to the style, we're going to depend on the standards.
okay,
So it's not intended in any way to conflict with the standards.
oh, sure, right. Yeah, and that's where I think that contemporary design is what
Yeah, I
sort
think
of
that
threw
was
me.
just a
Yeah.
flight of fancy that
Okay, so
we can get rid of.
Mhm.
the proposal is to strike contemporary?
Contemporary design.
Well, Will, you were saying leave design in, I think.
Well, would you have? I guess you could just design for then, so just say in addition, comma, alterations and additions to the rear.
Yeah,
Shall
that's,
not be
yeah,
discouraged.
just drop contemporary design for, yes,
Okay,
those 3 words.
Yeah.
okay. I'm fine with that. Everybody agree?
Yep.
Does that cover your objection?
Yeah, I think because when I read it, I didn't understand that that was just implying, letting people know that there'd be more leniency if
Right.
it's not visible from the streetscape.
Right.
So,
Right.
I thought it was interesting, and we may have talked about this a year ago, I may have forgotten, but that maybe it's desirable not to try to match the historic design, just
Right.
because it's not old, it's not
Right.
historic.
right, we don't
There-
want to create a false sense of history. We just
Exactly.
want to preserve what is historic. Right,
Yeah.
So to have it look different is okay. I mean,
Right. Of course, we'd prefer it
To
be
work.
complementary.
Right.
Not overbearing of what is historic, right? But
Uh-huh.
trying to mimic history, it can get,
Uh-huh.
then you wonder what actually is historic and
Yeah.
what's just playing the part.
So I think the intent was to follow the Secretary of the Interior's
Right.
not guidelines,
That's
standards
their standards. Mhm.
in respect to that.
Good. And then, Chris, you had a question about the appropriate landscaping. Didn't like that.
Right, yeah, that was another just, it's sort of vague about what exactly is appropriate landscaping.
Yeah, we
There's a
struggled,
definition.
we struggled with that.
Where was that at? Could you remind me?
It's in the definitions.
Number
one-
7. Oh, the definition?
Yeah, there's a definition of landscaping.
Yeah,
But it's elsewhere though, where we talked about landscaping.
Yeah, it's the reference that Chris is pointing out is 107, 5807A7, the last one under A.
And I think this came up because of certain properties on Maple Street that were totally inappropriate. And we were wanting to put something in about taking care of the landscaping, but we kind of struggled with what to say there.
Yeah, the page
What-
11 is the number 7, the A7.
What would you suggest in its place? Or do you think that's not appropriate?
Well, I think we should look at the definition of landscaping first.
That's on page 4.
Yeah,
The decorative aspect of open ground, grass, living ground cover, or some non-natural attractive cover at the front and or sides of a listed property or on all sides. In the case of some historic sites, as well as appropriate foundation plantings, shrubs, and so forth at the front of listed property, does not ordinarily apply to downtown buildings.
so the idea was that a listed property should have these two minimal landscaping features. Some kind of either natural or non-natural, but what's the word?
A ground cover.
Natural, attractive cover
Mhm.
and appropriate foundation plantings.
And you're feeling still like that appropriate is not, is too vague?
I guess I was more curious if this is they want to do more than just ground cover and shrubs at the, front of the property.
No, it's not intended to limit.
Okay,
Do you think it does? The intent was to put a minimum, that if you're in a historic district or you're a property with historic protection, you should at least
at least.
not have a dirt, untended dirt front lawn,
But maybe which
and you
is,
should not have a bare foundation with nothing.
Right.
are you talking the other way, like there's way too many trees that are planted and would never be historic?
No, I was thinking more of, say, I have, a portion of my yard I want to turn into a butterfly garden, right? Something.
Uh-huh.
So I take a portion of the grass and I plant native landscaping. Is that something that they would apply? I would have to apply for COA and say, I want to,
I
Yeah,
wouldn't think so. I
So-
guess, I don't think you would need an application for that. I read this as just expected. It's not a rule that you must, but it's just encouraging appropriate landscaping.
Well, if it's in the ordinance, it would be a rule. I mean, so, right, I mean,
right.
But it's,
somebody could object. and
Unless you're
say-
looking at me and I've never been a fan of this one from an enforcement standpoint.
I know.
But I don't
know.
matter. I'm not on the commission, but I'm very uncomfortable with this, but it's one small piece of a large ordinance. I mean, there's a lot of people I know that we'd rather have them have zero landscaping because it's overgrown and they don't take care of it.
Hmm.
But, I don't know. It's just really hard to draw that line.
Right.
I mean, maybe this one will not stand the scrutiny of council. I don't know. And if it doesn't, then I think that we can accept that. But I think that what was in my mind, at least, is that I look around at houses in my area of the city on North Prospect Street, and you can see the ones that are neglected are the ones where they have just stripped out all foundation plantings. And the properties just look bare naked. I don't think that's what we want in a historic district.
Okay, I would vote that we leave it and see how it flies, and if we find after, even if it's in here after a year or two, it's too problematic, we get rid of it. Is that okay? Chris, can you live with that?
Yeah, and I was just wondering if there was some additional, trying to think of a way we could phrase it so it's understood that it's the landscaping definition is a minimum, not to restrict additional.
Must maintain a minimum of appropriate landscaping. That doesn't quite sound right.
I know.
Adequate landscaping.
Okay, let's hold that. Chris, you work on a wording for
Okay,
for
that's
it,
fine.
and we can handle that in January. Okay? All right, and I think you had, you liked our 158.09.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to, I was glad to see that there's so many properties that, I don't know about, particularly in Bowling Green, the last 3 years, I haven't seen any, but so many times buildings are just neglected and have to be torn down. We
This
lose,
is
we lose a lot of historic fabric that way.
for the ears of our planning commission. Chris is just saying, I also wanted to note, I was happy to see this 158.09, demolition by neglect is the biggest threat to historic preservation. So he's applauding that
Yeah. Thank you.
particular.
Well, what I recall, it has to be there for the CLG
Right.
ordinance. There has to be a maintenance.
So we need it
Clause,
anyway.
yeah.
Okay.
If
good.
memory serves me right, I feel like this has been here like going on 2 years here that I'm,
Right.
might be mixing it all up.
Okay, excellent. So, let me see where we're at now. I think we can go back to Les here for a moment, the FAQs. We've covered most of them. Did you want to add something more to that?
Well, the question here is whether this larger document that includes 14 of them is something we want to use or not use. I mean, for Chris's benefit, just to remind everybody that back a number of months ago, John Wade and I were asked by the commission to investigate the possibility of creating some FAQs. And we solicited input from all commission members, and in the initial draft, I included all of the ones that were submitted. But after further thought and realizing how long the document was and some really helpful input from Heather, I decided, John Wade now being gone from the commission, so I'm sort of working on my own, decided that we should look at a pared down version, and this is a pared down version. It's still 7 pages, so it's still probably longer than it should be. Question is would it be useful to do it? To provide it to members of the community who might be interested, give it to constituent groups, so-called stakeholder groups? Or is it just muddying the waters?
Well, I think it's certainly good for us to have this in front of us when we're struggling to come up with an answer for a question. I'm not sure that we would, if we gave it to the property owners, that they would read it.
Right.
I think it's good to maintain it if something we put it to website or some point. But I like the idea of just kind of the condensed, the selected
Yeah.
FAQs maybe as a handout, at meetings
Right, and
or
we
like
already,
that, but
we
then-
already agreed we would do
Yeah, and
that,
it's,
yeah.
and it's gleaned from the master list of FAQs.
Right.
I like having it just because I want to go through and read these again and brush up on my background. So I think they're valuable, and they're, maybe there are individuals who are really interested that we want to share this with down the road.
And I think it's a place to house additional questions that come up.
No, thank you for putting that together. I know it's a lot of work.
Well, I
to
would
do
say
that.
it's valuable because, you have a X amount of page ordinance and it's open to a ton of interpretation. So this may not look like it, but it does boil down some basic information.
Yeah.
I would also add that I forgot, I had created that flow chart, so that might be helpful to add that flow chart. Remember, I had the diagrams of here's the
Mhm.
district or individual
Yeah.
property, that we could maybe throw that in
That's good.
at some point into this FAQ. But I do think condensed is a key word. And I made a few notes I can send you later, Les, but I think the benefits are really critical to list in a CLG. And I think there's several more that are listed. And I think one of them is sustainability. I mean, that's a huge benefit of historic preservation. And I feel like that aligns with the goals of this community that we hear over and over, the benefit of sustainability. So that's just an example of some things I
Okay.
think, not to make it longer, but I do think benefits are critical to highlight. Economic development, tourism. I mean, there's a lot of benefits that
Right.
we could add.
Okay, so please do send those to
Okay.
me. Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you think these are mostly useful for us at this point, not something
I
that we're
think
going to
so.
seek to try to disseminate to.
I don't
Um,
think it hurts. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with additional information. And again, we really don't have anything to hand out to people besides an ordinance. And I think that's more overwhelming than,
Yeah, I wouldn't do that. But if we have we're going to have a public hearing, but we may have some public meetings down the road in the library, like you did, what, 6 years ago, how long ever it was. Maybe something like this could be a handout for an event like.
and you
that.
have a website. So we have the draft ordinance on your website now.
Right.
We have your
Oh, we could-
presentation on the
We could add
website.
it there.
Yes. Mhm.
I did
Oh, yeah.
think that maybe 11, 12, and 13 on the last page could be dropped because they're basically just saying there are other examples of the same kind of thing that's already been addressed in 9 and 10.
Mhm.
But everything else seemed to be useful. So as I look back over it, that's the only thing that I thought maybe we could condense a little bit.
Yeah, and I do like the idea. I mean, Chris basically brought it up earlier that people have this lack of knowledge on what the register is. Well, I think my house already is on the registrar, so why do I need this?
Right.
So that might be nice just to touch on what that is versus what
Yeah.
this ordinance does.
Yeah,
Because
so-
technically, we have no local control over any historic preservation. So that might just be something of interest. But like I said, I'll email you my comments later.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
When we take these to the planning commission, could we make a different color?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Because I can't read that.
yep, okay.
The contrast.
The yellow works better.
Well, I
doesn't it?
think so, yeah.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
blue kind of, and maybe it's my own eyes.
No, I agree.
Okay, but I think it's great to have that. Okay,
I
good.
understand this next public hearing is this meeting's for Plan Commission, but hopefully at this point, some of our community members are aware and starting to get engaged. And I think having something like this available to them before these public hearings could curb some negative comments.
Well, would it help to send this to the planning commission, this list of,
Oh, absolutely. Once it's polished, yeah.
Yeah.
the FAQs, the long list?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
And you're saying we could put them on our website?
Yes. We could
Good.
even add, the city website to this and where you go for all the information that's out there so far.
And so, and if a person did show up at a city office and ask for information, it could be provided then?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay.
Okay, excellent. Will, you did some nice research for us. Thank you for coming
That
up with.
was one of the architects that's actually teaching right now in the architecture department. I'm a friend of his and I've gone to some continuing education down in Dayton area. He's a Dayton area architect and he's actually been in contact with those cities and the people that have been doing this down that area. So I thought I'll send it because to me, I look at him as at some point maybe having something like that as a guide to help homeowners be able to do some architectural features and things like that, and use it as like an encyclopedia or something like or we'd have a graphic standard in architecture we'd rely on to look for details and look for things. I could see not developing like the cities did there. They're, I think, kind of mandating some of those like door patterns and things like this, but I could see us using it as like suggestions or here's some information on those kinds of things.
I think if we can direct people to the right resources, so they're not feeling like they have to do all the homework on how do I fix this? My
Yeah.
corbel is rotted. How do I
Yeah.
fix it?
So just to be clear what we're talking about, Will came up with some criteria and guidelines from, I think, 3 cities, right? Centerville and Dayton and Springboro.
Spring, yeah. They're just existing design like guidelines.
And it showed maps of their historic districts and then a whole series of different
I thought it
guidelines.
was interesting looking at the map and the numbers and then the list that correspond to the numbers because they're not all, they're not like all consecutive, like
Right.
adjoining. Some of them are.
Some are non-contributing,
Yeah.
yeah. And then also you had that one page of just residences with the name of the home. Now, I don't know if that's the home of the person that was living there now, or it was just called the
Certain resident.
Sanford home or something, that first owner.
Like historic.
Yeah. And I'm thinking maybe that's something we want to think about doing down the road ourselves. But I think those are valuable resources. Thank you.
Those are just, I'm sure there's a lot more.
Yeah.
Question I have, Will, have you looked at the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines to see how they mesh with?
Not in detail. I looked at the one I actually bought. I have, but I think it's, and I can't remember which one it was referenced in one of the documents quite a while ago. And it was interesting just looking at things that it would recommend doing. Like there were a lot of recommendations. If you're doing brickwork, like don't sandblast it or,
Yeah, right.
things like that. Those.
And there's, the National Park Service has briefing, all sorts of briefs that address a lot of that. That's, if you know to look for that, you can sort of Google it, but I think providing that sort of information to our community, like you said, the brick, making sure you're sandblasting or high pressure water blasting is not encouraged.
That's why I
Those
think,
sorts of things that we have, that information's already out there. We just want to make sure we can either consolidate it for our community or point them in that direction.
I think that to me is one of the benefits of being in the districts, and that is like, these are some of the tools we want to share with the
Exactly.
districts and
Right.
individuals.
And I think we need to keep saying that over and over, that,
Mhm.
we're trying to help.
Yeah.
We're not trying to be police men and women to stop anything in particular, but we want to make our community, we want it to be preserved and we want it to be vital and attractive place where people want to live, including ourselves. And that, I think I would appreciate for my own home, looking at a lot of those materials.
It's like even possibly finding sources of woodworkers or people that can do some of this work, you know?
Identifying,
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of
Because
thing. would be
I'm
great.
sure Chris has probably attended some seminars I have that on preservation and how to restore wood that's rotten and things like
Right.
this. And sometimes it may be to do fiberglassing or something else, but it makes the original look like it did originally.
well, and Chris,
So
you
it's
were,
Just a quick note about the history here. When the first attempt back in 2014, 15 was made on this, the document that was forwarded included a whole set of detailed guidelines of the sort that we're talking about. And they were, most of us think, one of the main reasons why that effort crashed and burned at the time.
They thought, like they were thinking you're mandating
Yeah.
these things. This
Yeah.
is the kind of screen
Right.
door you will put. No,
Right.
ours
So
would
if
be
we
the-
were to do this sort of, the history is we decided this time we weren't going to do that.
Right.
That we would reference the Secretary of the Interior's guidelines, which we do.
Mhm.
And this is the place to go for suggestions and details. I mean, I agree, it would be useful maybe if we had a local version of it, as long as, one, we don't have to make it a formal, official,
no.
and get votes from city council. We don't want to do that. We don't want to go that route again.
Mhm.
And I
I could-
think if it's clear that they're simply suggestions,
Like-
guidelines,
Oh.
that we would not have to. But it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to do it.
Well, and some of these things would be copyrighted, I noticed, so whether we could borrow some of the ideas and that from these, those are the kind of things we could check into, but professionally, we use this, we had the documents called a graphic standard. And it was like, it'd been, I don't know how many editions from back in
I
the
know.
20s. But it's something we'd refer to for just information on all kinds of things. It's like an encyclopedia of site plan, just all kinds of things. I could see us creating something that is sort of a standalone from the HPC, but it's not like an ordinance, or it's
Right.
suggestions and
Yeah, resources.
resources.
Yeah.
Well, and I think if you remember when Paul Tepaneco was here with Pogemeyer, they have several in Toledo, but that's, Toledo's much larger and they have neighborhoods built in so many different eras that was very helpful. And they have their own commissions for each district. So I think it just, the scale of economy there is a lot different. So I think just kind of not biting off more than we can chew is a huge issue right now. What also stands out for me is when Nathan Bevel was here from the State Historic Preservation Office, he said they do these building doctors that are so valuable. And I think that's so important because many people think, oh, I'm just getting rid of all these wood windows, new vinyl, it'll be cheaper. And Nathan will say, no, it's not. I mean, did you look at this and doing this? And it ends up being much cheaper to preserve the wood windows you have. So I see that as being really critical information to get into the community at some point.
When we have to do continuing ed, so I was just reading something, I didn't know that there's apparently some kind of window that you can actually add to an existing window. I mean, somehow it's hermetically sealed to the glass. So it's not, you don't have to take it. So in other words, you can go to multiple panes. And so there's products that are being developed that we could try to guide people to. And
Right.
And Nathan had said that too during his talk, that you just can't keep up with the products out there that are new, the new technologies. So sometimes when you write those potential guidelines, there's some caution with that because again, all these new products that come out every day.
maybe what we need for our 5th commissioner is a person who's good at PR and writing and getting articles out and booklets and doing this future guideline that we're talking about. That would be great. I'm sure we could all do it here, but I'd like a professional that wants to do that. So that would be great if it happened. All right.
So
Let's,
for the minutes, did we decide anything about this?
just that it's a good resource, you mean, as far as
As,
creating
right,
a future,
a future set of
I think it's,
local
I just-
guidelines.
think it's something to think about at this time and not, nothing
Something-
formal.
Something for the
Mhm.
future.
It was, I just sent that out to show you that some existed,
Okay, yeah.
you know, that's, yeah.
Okay, public engagement plan, update. Les, you had some suggestions.
I have some suggestions, but they all require work, and I don't know whether we can take it on, but I think ideally, it would be wonderful if somebody could sit down with at least the, what's he called, what's Kalmar for the county?
Oh,
county executive.
Wood County Commission.
To let the, so that we are just doing a little outreach saying we're doing this. The county courthouse would be an obvious building that to protect. I don't know whether you're interested, but in other words, just let them know what we're doing.
Just have a meeting with them and.
Yeah, I
and
think it probably could be Kalmar rather than the commissioners unless
They would have,
he wanted to go further.
they would have our support and
Right.
we want to know if they want it.
So that wouldn't require too much work. And the same thing with the library, the library, apart from the building itself, which might possibly be a historic building, I don't know, but they own that old house on the other side of Church Street.
Right, beautiful
It's
house.
another sort of obvious, and it seems like maybe we should have a meeting with the director of the library to say, this is what's going on. You've got a property that would be an obvious candidate. I want you to know about all of this, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
And then the tough one is the third one. But it probably really ought to happen if we could find some way to do it. If there were some way of meeting with either selected landlords, realtors, or maybe their group before this comes to the city council.
Before February. Yeah.
And we went to them and did a version of our presentation and tried to solicit their support.
Mhm.
Not assume that they're going to be opposed, but say, here's something, there's a planning opportunity for the city that we think is potentially really wonderful. We have your support.
Would that, my thinking is we invite a couple people to come as representatives to our meeting, and it could happen in January if we moved on it. And just have a roundtable discussion, what do you want? What do you not want? How can we help you? How can you help us? Just keep it very much a partnership instead of we telling the landowners, realtors what we want.
Well, I think if we did that before the,
For the planning commission.
not
before the,
before the council, we would have to give them the ordinance. I mean, we'd have to talk about the ordinance because.
So maybe it should happen if we're going to do that after that meeting, maybe in later February.
Well, here's a possibility that at the public hearing, maybe both the planning commission public hearing and the city council meeting, maybe there will be organized objection. There may not be. I hope there won't be. But we haven't really reached out. We haven't found out whether we could get some allies. Maybe we could. Maybe the Greens would be allies. Maybe Mr. Mauer would be an ally. Maybe.
Who has friends that are realtors? You had, Green.
Yeah, I could probably try to call either Al or Steve Green and see if they would be willing to
Talk
meet
anyway.
talk with all of us or some of us. Well,
Mhm.
all of us makes it an official meeting, doesn't it? So we have to be
Yeah,
careful about that.
maybe just a conversation or even an email conversation to kind of sense their feelings.
I just thought I should put these ideas in front of the whole commission to see what you think.
we need to be thinking about the implications for the old post office. Do we want to be involved in the plans? I know that there was some information in the newspaper a couple weeks ago about starting to think about a reuse of that space and rebuilding. Do you know anything more about that, Heather, at this point?
As far as I know, it's planned to be within that 2021 budget to start planning and
It's
design.
moving forward.
And are we involved, or could we be involved in how that it progresses? I mean, that realizing that post office is a historic building in town.
I mean, I think the latest recommendation is that the facade is kept.
Right.
Yeah, the front facade is kept. My personal feeling is it's maybe a little late to seek formal input on it. And the difference is that that's the city's the owner there, so they know about all of this.
Yeah,
It's not
and I
something
think
that-
essentially they're supportive. If
Yeah, yeah.
if they're keeping the facade, I think that's.
That's why I didn't
About all we
mention
can
them,
ask.
because they're sort of already in the game.
I do want to think at some point about the Clazel also, that somehow can be one of our targets to preserve. It's a distinctive landmark in our downtown.
Well, currently it's for sale or for lease, so.
Is that right,
mhm.
for sale?
Well, I had heard that, didn't we talk about that maybe a couple months ago, that somebody was wanting to build apartments in that? I think one of us should buy it.
Yeah.
It won't be me, I don't think, but I appreciate seeing that theater, even if it's not in use. Okay, well, we're
So was
near,
it decided, or are we inviting people to our meeting in January, or are we just reaching out to stakeholders we think might be nice to reach out to?
I think maybe we're just asking for volunteers here. I'm willing to try to talk to the Greens.
that'd be great if you could
If
start.
anybody is
start
willing
with
to
that.
talk to Kalmar or to, I don't know the name of the director of the library, but
Michael Penrod.
Penrod, that's right. I
I-
don't think this is something that we don't really have time to organize big formal meetings and we can't legally anyway unless we have,
How many
So-
public hearings does council have?
One,
Just the one before they vote on it?
normally, yes.
but the planning commission will have one first.
Yeah, we may get
That
a
might be good to see who comes to the planning
We might
commission. If
get
there's
a-
negatives,
a
then,
good
then-
sense from that,
then
yeah.
approach. Like if there's
right?
negatives
Yeah.
from realtors or whoever, then we could approach and invite them to talk one-on-one or.
Okay, so let's, if you can reach out to Greens, and then we'll sense the climate at that planning commission, and then we can regroup and go from
If
there.
we need to, yeah, maybe positive.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Excellent. Okay, so what do we have left here? Find my notes. We had a couple things on the agenda, but I don't think there's anything to discuss. What do we have there?
Yeah, building,
Heather,
number 7, building inventories.
updating goals, we kind of,
Updating goals,
are
I
doing-
think we finished that topic.
right, building inventories, we don't have anything
Later.
to add to that. Lobby visitation, we don't have a big lobby today. So,
Do they have anything else they want to say or?
We do have
we
some
do,
lobby
we do
visitation
have, we
on,
have to, any final comments from our guests today?
No, but thank you for inviting us and allowing us to be a part of your discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, we
Thank you.
appreciate, Appreciate you being here. We hope we didn't bore you.
It
too much.
definitely did not bore me.
Good.
Yes, and I would just say thank you as well. I couldn't deactivate my mute button.
I know, it's hard to find sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Jeff and Judy, for joining us today. We appreciate your help and your support. That's all I have. Anybody want to?
Make a motion that we adjourn,
Yes?
Okay, and we're set for the 22nd, right?
22nd at 3 o'clock.
Okay.
Good. All right.
Did a lousy job of writing notes today, so I'm wishing myself luck in writing these minutes.
We trust you to do
Oh,
it.
God.
Did you officially adjourn?
We haven't because, we had a motion, Will, did you motion?
I made a
Do we
motion.
have a second?
Les?
2 seconds,
I
okay.
was voting.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.